What is up, my Goonies and Doomers? Before we get into another video, like, comment, share, subscribe, you know the drill, and in the description down below, or somewhere around here, you'll find my link tree, which will have access to all of my socials, especially my Twitch and Kick. Make sure you hit the notification bell, by the way, for both of those, because even I don't 100% know when I'm going live right now, as my life is kind of chaotic at the moment. So hit those buttons so you know when I'm live. Other than that, I don't want to waste your time. Enjoy the video. All right, guys, today we are reacting to why young men don't like the Democrats. If you didn't know, I'm actually a Democrat, or liberal, whatever you want to call me. Not a leftist, though, very specifically. I do not like the leftists. So, let's see what this is about.
Trump and Vance and them, they just put themselves out there. They're more direct.
They have co-opted masculinity and they've politicized it.
I hate this term, the Joe Rogan of the left, that they need one. Joe Rogan is sort of left.
I do feel as though they are a distraction from class consciousness.
All of a sudden, everybody's talking about young men.
And it's about damn time.
Men.
Young men.
More than half of the male vote nationwide went to Trump.
Men under 30.
Men under 30.
This was the testosterone podcast election.
$20 million to try and solve this big mystery.
$20 million.
$20 million. Masculinity.
Bro culture.
Young men.
The manosphere.
Hi, my name's Richard Reeves, and I've spent the last few years thinking about, researching, and writing about the struggles that young men, and particularly working class men, are facing in America. Because of how the last election went, there's a lot more attention on young men than actually at any time since I've been working on this issue. But I've been wondering, with all of this discourse talking about men, how many people have actually talked to men?
Probably not many, outside of like other men talking to each other inside of like the workforce and whatnot. Yeah, I mean, ironically, as much as you'll see online people throwing around words like, oh, go to therapy, you need therapy, all this stuff. Ironically, these are the same people who usually end up shaming or trying to use it as an attack against men if they are seeing therapy. If they dare admit to it, they're like, oh, that's why you have X opinion I disagree with. It's because you're insert mental illness here, even if that's not the case. And it's literally just a simple basic mental health checkup. So we have this cognitive dissonance, I guess. I'm not really sure if that's necessarily the right phrase, but it's something like that, where you have a society that is now trying to tell men to go get therapy, but then simultaneously shaming them if they do. It's like, pick a lane, people.
After all, the problems facing men are real.
You should see therapists, by the way. That's my advice. Fuck the haters. Go see a therapist. It's not even if you have anything wrong with you, just for a check-in.
And serious.
Same way you see a doctor every like 6 months for blood results. Same way you see a dentist every 6 months or so for like clean your teeth, or at least you should be. It's the same thing. Just see a therapist every several months, even if it's not regular, just for a checkup. Mental health is important. Take care of yourself, fellas.
Men account for 80% of deaths from suicide, 70% of overdose deaths, 70% of the homeless population in America. They've fallen behind in education, in the labor market, and other major metrics. And it's young men in particular, those aged between 20 and 30, who are feeling the sharpest impact of many of these changing ideas and paradigms about men's roles, opportunities, and their outcomes. So I had a pretty wide-ranging conversation with 5 young men about their views on dating, mental health, toxic masculinity.
Before they even get into it, let me give my 2 cents on this. The reason I think a lot of those statistics are so against men is because of the fact that men are the doers. Like, people will try and paint men as these evil things, or oh, they're just violent, or oh, it's the testosterone, which may or may not even be the case. But I'll tell you what is the case. Men are the doers in society, okay? We are the doers. We get shit done. And so because of that, if you were to take all of the men out of society right now, aside from the fact it would collapse because we run like 80-90% of every single one of the major industries, aside from that, let's just say somehow it keeps on going, what you would see is all of the violence, all of the criminality that you see men commit, that would now be transferred to women, because women would be all that's left, so now they'd have to fight for their own resources. It's the reason the homeless population is like, what did he say, 70-80% or whatever men, and the only like 20-30% are actually women? It's because women, it's just a fact. This isn't to hate on women, this isn't to be misogynistic, it's just a fact. Women are treated differently in our society. They have a lot more options available to them than men do. They have a lot more people willing to take care of them. They have a lot less expectations on them. They are not seen as the expected providers. I mean, a small carve out for single mothers, I guess. But aside from that, generally speaking, they don't have it expected of them. Meanwhile, men do. Men are out there in the streets because we have the strength. Oh, sorry, unpaused it. And that is why the crime rate is usually so high for men. If you got rid of men and they had the same, women were all that's left, and they had the same culture, the same socioeconomic issues, the same everything, you would see women out in the streets committing crime now for their survival, for their own, to take care of themselves instead of having a man help them with it or whatever else, or their family, or whatever else you want to call it. That's why. Men are the doers. We are both metaphorically and literally the ones on the front line, overwhelmingly. That is why you see statistics like that. And it's ironically stuff like the homeless that back that up. We are the doers, and that is why.
And of course, politics.
I am a carpenter and a...
It's also why, by the way, to talk on the suicide real quick, sorry to keep pausing it, but that's also why the suicide rate in men is so high as well, is because we have so much pressure on us. We have so much expectation on us. We have so much both interpersonal and societal expectations. And when people fail to live up to those expectations, especially when they are seeing themselves now as like a failure, failure to provide, failure to take care of your family, failure to be whatever, it compounds things, and eventually, boom. That's just how it goes. And that's why.
Musician.
I was a former teacher, and now I'm a union organizer.
I'm currently working on an undergraduate degree.
I've been bouncing around different part-time jobs and internships.
I've done electrical, I've done construction.
Most recently as a substitute teacher, and now working at the front desk at a tennis club.
Moving, cleaning, any type of physical labor.
Some of what they said might make you uncomfortable, but the reality is whether you're a progressive or a conservative,
I think it's understandable.
Both sides need to confront their problem with young men, or a large share of the
Yes. Here's the problem. Before they even get into the video, I'll tell you what the damn problem is. All right? The right wing sees men as nothing but a tool. They are nothing but a tool. They are something to be used and then discarded when it's convenient. That is it. The right does not care about you. Andrew Tate does not care about you. The red pill does not care about you. They might say they do, but then the very next second, they'll be like, oh, I care about you. Here's this, this, and this. By the way, subscribe to our, $30 a month Hustlers University or whatever. It's a scam. It's a scam. If you actually wanted to help people, you wouldn't charge them. On that note, in the description down below, you'll find a link tree with my Patreon. No, but I'm kidding. Don't do it. Not based on that, anyways. So that's the issue with the right, is that the right just doesn't really care about men. They don't. They might say they do. They might like to put the military up, like prop the military up, for instance, as like this big great thing. But then what happens when it comes to benefits? What happens when like the VA needs funding? Suddenly it's crickets. World's smallest violin all of a sudden. And then for the left, the problem with the left is, well, it's twofold. Number one, they care. The left actually cares. That's why they support social programs and usually support the funding of things like the VA and other social programs for them and whatnot. They actually do care, but they suck ass at marketing. I'm not even kidding. The left is the single worst group of individuals I've ever seen in my life. They could not market water to a man on fire. Meanwhile, Republicans could market arsenic as freedom juice, and a week from now, half the country would be drinking it. That is the difference. That is the problem. The left cannot market for shit. And then the other issue, although it is a minority issue still, to be clear, there's an issue going online where a lot of people are mistaking, leftists, people like Hassan Piker or whatever else, for Democrats. These people are not liberals. These people, they might ultimately vote Democrat, but they are not representative, even remotely close to the Democratic Party. They have like maybe 4 representatives in all of Congress / the House. They have like no political actual movement behind them in terms of actual power. So the mass majority of the actual Democratic Party is just genuine liberals, not leftists, but liberals. And of that minority of leftists, though, you'll see them very vocal online, constantly bashing men, telling them that they don't care, telling them that they're like invalidating their feelings. Ironically, all the stuff that they complain about toxic masculinity doing from men to women, they now do from women to men. And they don't care. They do not care. And yeah, so that's why both sides have problems with men. One side just wants to use them, the other side actually cares but can't convince them they care, because a lot of their shit is quite frankly super fake, and then a hyper loud minority outright hates them. So it's like, yeah, no duh, they go right when you treat them like that. It's not surprising. It's the most predictable thing in the world. Anyways, that's my 2 cents. Let's see what they have to say about it.
Population is not going to have a political home. That means they might turn to more extreme ideologies. And meanwhile, their problems just get worse. So let's get into it. Did you vote in past elections, and can you tell us how you voted?
In 2016, I voted for Trump over Hillary. Before then, you know, I didn't really vote, but I did support Obama in 2012 and 2008. We definitely went Trump in 2020. Not like I didn't support him. I don't support anything political, you know. I believe that I'm just a working man in America. You know, the president don't matter for me. They ain't gonna pass some crazy executive order that's gonna change my life or anything.
It's all happening.
Just
Well, how'd that turn out, buddy? I'm sorry, that's just a straight up misconception. Obviously, like, you might not care about politics, but politics care about you. It will come to bite you in the butt. And so now, thanks to, at least recently, Trump passing several executive orders, you know, especially if you had anything in stocks, or maybe he's a working man, so maybe he doesn't have stocks, but if he, you know, his work might dry up, because maybe now whatever product he was moving is now still stuck on those carrier ships because they're not coming from China anymore. Maybe he's out of a job now. Maybe it's something else. Like, and also, to be fair, maybe him specifically is completely fine. But my point is that the executive orders and what the president and what the Congress and what politics do in this nation absolutely trickle down to the everyday average person. Even if it's only in the form of like grocery prices going up now due to tariffs or whatever else. Like, that is stuff that affects you and is going to affect you whether you like it or not. So I do not like this mindset where people think politics don't matter. They do.
Smoke and mirrors for me, you know what I'm saying?
I voted in this election. I voted red down the ballot, and I voted in the primary, and before that I was too young.
The last time I voted was 2012 for Obama. It was the first time I could vote. After that, I kind of felt as though, you know, politics and politicians were kind of blending into a uniform party overall, and things weren't fundamentally changing.
All throughout high school, I used to be a Republican, but my family got affected by the 2017 Trump tax cuts.
You got affected by it in what way? In a good way?
Yeah. In a bad way.
In a bad way.
Bad way.
Okay.
And I was just thinking to myself, like, who is this billionaire?
It's just like that bill they're trying to pass right now, the big beautiful bill or whatever he calls it, where it's like a big tax break for the ultra wealthy, but the taxes are going up on everyone who makes it like under 100,000 a year or whatever it is. The 2017 tax cuts were the same way, but people didn't realize it, notice it, or care about it because it was delayed. It was like the tax cuts for the billionaires were permanent, but the tax cuts for the lower people only lasted for like, I think it was like for 5 years, 10 years, something like that. And then after that, they're going to expire and then everyone's going to pay more. But for now, at least in the short term, they were paying less, so they don't really care. They just saw the immediate slight gain, and like a frog being boiled alive, they just didn't feel the temperature rising until it was too late.
To lie to us and say, well, I'm going to fight for the truck driver, I'm going to fight for the carpenter and the middle class person, when...
How many truck drivers have been putting out of work now thanks to those tariffs because they don't got product to ship?
He's not any of those things.
So I've just had a kind of cynical view on general elections. You know, I really don't think the general election matters that much unless you live in a handful of states, and I just use it right.
Okay, so he's slightly right about that, and it's actually why I hate the electoral college system. It's why I absolutely hate it. I do think it should be one person, one vote for the presidency. I feel like, and I know what some people say, oh, well, that just leaves like California and New York. First of all, not necessarily true. You have Texas as well. But secondly, that doesn't matter. If you are someone who is going to be affected by the president's policies, you should have an equal say in what that's going to be. That's all there is to it. So if the majority of people want one person, then they would get the other, which, by the way, at least according to the results of the last election, Trump won the popular vote by 51%. Even if the Electoral College didn't exist, Trump would have won the last election. Just barely, granted, but he still would have won it. Like, the Electoral College needs to go. If the people want a certain president, then they'll ask for that certain president. And, you know, what you have is the Electoral College. It results in men like this who feel disenfranchised. They feel like no one hears them because since they live in a deep red state and their state's going to vote red, well, if you're blue, what's the point in voting? There kind of isn't one. He's not necessarily wrong because your state's going to go 100% red. And same thing vice versa. What if you're a Republican living in New York or California? Your vote doesn't matter. Your state's going blue, hardcore. The list goes on and on. This is why I personally believe, and I genuinely believe this, the Electoral College, at least for the presidency, needs to go. It needs to leave. It needs to be done away with. It is outdated. It was made for a different time, and I think the people should be allowed to decide their own fate. If you are a Democrat in Texas, your vote should carry the same amount of weight as a Republican living in California, and vice versa. That is just simply how it should be. And if this leads to some states feeling a little disenfranchised because they have a population of 2 fucking people, like out in the middle of buttfuck nowhere, Montana, I'm sorry. Like, at the end of the day, you might feel disenfranchised, but you're not. It's still one person, one vote. Just the majority of the nation doesn't agree with you, and that just is how it is. I don't think because you're in a minority state with, your main population being cows or whatever, should give you the right to have a greater vote or a greater say in the election than anyone else. I just don't think that's how that should work. If you want to vote for different senators, different state representatives, different whatever else, that's fine. If you want to have down ballot initiatives, that's different as well. But if you're voting for someone who is the president of the entire nation, then the entire nation should get an equal one person, one vote say over who it's going to be. And I just don't see any counter arguments to that are at all convincing, that don't also rely on just some hyper minority of people having greater power than the majority for some vague idea of disenfranchisement, when in reality, the Electoral College, like you're seeing here with this guy, is far more disenfranchising. But anyways, rant over. Let's continue.
Right in. I voted for local measures, but I don't really feel seen or heard by anyone in the government.
Let's look at some economic realities. In the top 20% of the income distribution, both women and men are flourishing on almost every measure. Growing wealth, longer lifespans. But outside of this top bracket, over the last 50 years, the trajectories for women and men have been very different. Women today are working more and for better pay than ever before. There's still a gender pay gap, but it's narrowing, which is great news. Men, on the other hand, are working less, often for worse pay. Real wage levels for many men are trending down. I wanted to know if the guys in this room were feeling the effects of these economic trends.
By the way, I want to clarify that real quick. The wage gap is a scam. It's not real. It's not real, or at least it's not real in the way people think. When people hear wage gap, they usually think, oh, women are getting paid less than men. No, they're not. That is illegal. If you are a woman in the workplace doing the same job as a man and working the same number of hours and you're getting paid less than he is, you need to sue your boss because that is illegal, and it has been illegal for a while now. What the gender pay gap actually is that women just simply don't work as much as men for any number of reasons, whether it's maternity, whether it's they take more time off to take care of the family, whatever it is. The point is, of course, they get paid less. They work less hours. That's the issue. And that is, by the way, quite frankly, on them. It is. I'm sorry, it is. You think men don't make sacrifices to make sure they work those extra hours to make that extra money? They absolutely do. And so that's why I don't like when people bring up the gender pay gap, because it's bunk. It's complete bunk, or at least in the way people usually mean it. If women want to make more money, they need to work more hours. That's all there is to it. And then beyond that, it's an issue of just salary amounts, like how many women are in these very high top bracket paying jobs versus men. And now, to be fair, that is what he's talking about, because that is what's changing. There are more and more women going into college and less men going into college, which results in them being more and more educated, which results in them getting more and more of the higher paying jobs, which is now closing that prior pay gap. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. I just wanted to touch on that because a lot of people think the gender pay gap is that women just get paid less than men based on like the same work or whatever, and that's just not true. They get paid less than men because they do less valuable work or work less hours, which they should get paid less for because that's how the economics work. Your issue isn't with the pay gap. Your issue is with existence. Economics.
On average, do you think that men are having it harder or women are having it harder?
Men are absolutely having it harder. Again, the homelessness, I don't see how you argue against that with the homelessness statistic alone. Never mind the suicide rate on top of that. Never mind certain dating statistics. Like every statistic is basically against men, but except for the fact that apparently we do work more and get paid slightly more than women on average because of, again, putting in more time and effort or higher paying jobs. Aside from that one thing, in every other statistic, men are doing worse than women. But all of those other ones aside, the homeless gap alone, the fact only 20% of women are homeless, that alone shows you beyond any shadow of doubt, like no one can argue against that. Men have it harder. That's just objectively true. Now, to be fair, clarification, I don't subscribe to this idea about trauma Olympics. That's not to say that women don't have problems. They do have problems. Some of them are even unique problems to just women that men don't have to deal with. They do have their own suffering. But right now, in the current climate, men, just factually speaking, do have it harder than women, if you want to really bring it down to that. But they both have their own independent struggles.
In the economy today? I'll start with you, Joel.
I'd say vaguely men, but I'd say vaguely in the
Why?
and sort of barely.
Why is that?
A big problem when you send manufacturing jobs off to other countries is that they are mostly blue-collar jobs. I don't entirely mean to stereotype, but
Manufacturing skews very male. That's just a fact.
Everybody's getting screwed, but I think if you're talking 50.01, then I think it'd be men.
Personally, like including myself, I can think of like 5 or 6 of my friends who are guys who have college degrees and who have not been able to find work since graduating. Some of them even with like
I can also attest to that, to be fair. I mean, not no work at all, but I have a friend who got a degree in college, and he's now working some totally different separate job that has nothing to do with his degree because he couldn't find a job. He's still looking for a job in his field. He can't find one. So he's doing supplemental stuff in the meantime.
advanced degrees. I cannot say the same about any of my girlfriends. I can't think of a single one who's unemployed. You know, and part of it is just like, I think women at this age are naturally risk averse, so they're not gonna like leave a job if they don't have something lined up. There are a lot of different factors, but it's just an interesting thing to think about.
Obviously, I work with a lot of people. They tell me about their wages, their job, and women are definitely doing better in terms of like white collar work. But on the lower end, there's people, of course, that are struggling and people that, you know, need help. And then there's people that just have nothing. And, you know, people that just have nothing, I see that being primarily women on the lower end, but we don't have the same opportunity as we used to, like you brought up with manufacturing. I mean, that's a really great point.
I also think when it comes to college education, I don't know the exact number, but I'm pretty sure more women go to college
Yeah,
nowadays.
it's like 60-40, female, male now.
When you're having jobs,
that's what I
that are
talked
looking
about
for
earlier.
degrees, the percentage of men that don't have a degree versus the percentage of women that do have a degree probably affects it.
Labour force participation for men has dropped 7% in the last 50 years. A third of men with only a high school education are not working today, whereas in the 60s, almost all of them were working. And that's partly because male-dominated industries, production, manufacturing, construction, transportation, they've all been particularly vulnerable to a 1-2 punch of more free trade and automation. And loss of a job isn't just about the loss of income.
Yeah.
For many decades, being able...
That's another issue, by the way. That's something else that I have to comment on is the... we need to get a UBI. Like, there's no other option. We have 2 roads before us, gentlemen. 2 roads. Road 1, we ban all automation, we ban all AI, we ban all artificial anything, and we keep going on like it's the 1970s again for all of time. Or, and to be fair, if it's handled properly, this is the one I would prefer. Or, we finally start figuring out ways to tax these companies for their automation, and that those taxes specifically go straight into some sort of universal basic income fund, and then that gets distributed out to people, so that way the greater production and the greater wealth and the greater value and the greater everything else generated by these AI, generated by these new products that are being made in breakneck speeds with better precision, so on and so forth, all this robotic stuff, those savings can ultimately be taxed and passed on to the consumer to then spend money at those businesses, which then gets retaxed, and, you know, around and around and around it goes. Welcome to the velocity of money. So we need a UBI because eventually, like, think about this. What is the one job that for a long time people said AI would never take? It would, if anything, be the last job anyone would ever come for or ever lose to AI. It's art. Art. That's what everyone was like, there's no way a machine can do this. There's no way. And then look what's happening right now. Look at Will Smith's video from a year ago versus now. Look at the crisis going on right now with artists and them trying to battle back against AI art or voice actors, because now it's also coming for anyone doing that. Look at the number of AI entire YouTube channels that are springing up right now. Dude, no job is safe. I just saw a video. I don't think I reacted to it. It was offline. But I saw a video of a robot doing surgery, high precision surgery on a dude. And they did it. And how much longer? 5 years? 10? How long until robots are able to do basically every single job that exists? How long until self-driving cars become so smart that we create massive supercomputer self-driving 18-wheelers that are able to do everything perfectly? How long until that happens? That's what I'm saying. We need to start preparing through legislation, through contacting our representatives, through everything else. We need to push the idea of UBI, and we need to start preparing ourselves for a economy that essentially doesn't really run on any humans aside from maybe a handful of engineers and coders. And that's about it. And I know some people would like to say, well, then get a coding degree, get an engineering job. Not everyone can. The fact is, these are highly technical jobs. Me specifically, for instance, I'm dysgraphic, if you didn't know. Dysgraphic, it's sort of like a subset of a dyslexic. I would never be able to code. I would have to sit there. It would take me, even if I could code, it would take me 10 times as long to make a single proper working line of code as any other normal person. Because I would have to go over it again and again and again and again and again to make sure I didn't mix up a B and a D somewhere, a lowercase b and a lowercase d somewhere in the code, or a p with a 9, or a period somewhere that I somehow missed, which I already know bothers some coders, but for me it'd be infinitely worse. I'd look at that and I'd see it 10 times over and still not notice that I looked at it. I would not be able to do that job. And so, not to be fair, that's where disability, you could argue, comes in. But the point is that not everyone can do these jobs. We're going to need an alternative, or our economy, our society is fucked.
Able to find a well-paying job and provide for a family was an essential part of the script that men could look to for how to be in the world. But now things have changed, both for the better, with women having more career opportunities, but also for the worse, with the middle-class standard of living becoming increasingly difficult to afford, sometimes even on 2 salaries. And the men that I talk to, they say that even though the world's changed, the script hasn't really caught up. It's almost like they're being cast in a modern-day HBO drama with a screenplay from Leave It to Beaver.
You know, Wally, shaving is just one of the outward signs of being a man. It's a whole lot more important to try to be a man inside first.
There's still a feeling of like having to be a provider, despite, you know, the economic situation currently where that's becoming increasingly harder.
Especially for working class men.
Yeah.
Do you all agree with that there is still this expectation on men to be doing well economically?
Absolutely.
Even as
Yeah,
it's harder for men to do well economically in many cases?
I think the expectation is there, but I think it's less of an external pressure and more among men. There's a sense of inferiority.
So you think it's more about almost like the competition?
I do, yeah.
But I want to get...
I mean, that might play some small part of it, but he's ultimately wrong. That's not it. That's maybe a small part of it, admittedly. But the actual reason, sorry to keep pausing, by the way, but yeah, the reason a lot of men are struggling right now financially and feeling the pressure of being a provider but not being able to meet it is ultimately women. It is. The fact is, most women don't want to date men who make less than them. This is an issue women still have to work on because they see it as quote unquote dating down. You know, it's not exactly sexy, the idea of being a house husband. Now, to be fair, you can say that's a different matter because, you know, a house husband implies that you're not making any money yourself. And in this economy, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to skip that whole argument. You get what I'm saying. So the point is, though, is that we have an issue right now in the dating market and in the economy where women are more and more filling the role of traditionally masculine roles, but men are not being allowed to step into traditionally feminine roles, like the housekeeper, like the caregiver, all this other stuff. Now, I'm not saying none anywhere ever. Obviously, there are exceptions, and maybe this has changed a little bit, but it's not changing fast enough, and it's not being widely accepted enough. If anything, you have some women that are using it against men to attack them. And it's just, yeah, it's just a messed up situation. I could see it being a bit of a competition. Like, I'm not going to rule out the fact that men like that might exist, what he's talking about. But me personally, I have never had another man be like, haha, I make more than you, ha ha ha, let me rule over you, or oh, you're a loser, or This is just simply an experience. Not only have I never heard of, none of my friends have ever heard of it. None of my friends have ever brought up. I've never seen this sentiment online hardly at all, even with people that are messing with each other. I think I've maybe seen one man one time on Twitter brag about having more wealth than someone else, and that was it. In the entirety of my lifespan. Now, as for the opposite, I have seen tons of women attack men for not making more than they are, for just being broke boys, quote unquote, and for shaming them up and down all day long for it. I have seen this more times than I can count, on more mediums than I can count. It is wild.
Get to this change thing. Maybe Chris, you and Joel, you both talked about your grandfathers, and I think you both talked about them providing, like, for their family. So how do you think it's different now? How do you think the expectations on men are different now to they were on your grandfather? Are they better or worse?
Worse, because the economy, you know, things is more expensive now. In our area, the DMV has a lot to do with it too.
True.
Like, this is a high earning area. Cost of living is through the roof.
Yep, that's also true.
Says my grandfather growing up down in Georgia, South Carolina, I don't even know what their rent was. It's probably somebody's car insurance up
But
here.
women weren't earning as much back then, right?
Nah,
so they were more reliant on him.
I never seen my grandmother work at all.
Exactly.
Yeah, my grandmother never worked. She was always at the house with me, or if I was in school, and my grandfather made enough money.
So she didn't need him economically in a way maybe that women hopefully don't today.
She just knew that he was going to take care of everything.
Okay. Hayden?
I think men, yes, due to, you know, chivalry and traditional gender roles, they are expected to be providers, but I don't care if my future wife makes more money than me. That doesn't matter.
Do any of you care? Would any of you?
No.
I actually just realized there is actually a small part of people. There are some men out there that care if their woman makes more than them. They do see it as slightly emasculating, but ultimately it comes from that societal. I mean, generally speaking, I'm sure there's some that are just really insecure. But generally speaking, even of those men, it comes from the societal pressure because they don't want to be a loser, because they're aware that if they make less than their woman, then maybe their woman won't like them anymore, or other women or other people in general will see them as more of a quote-unquote loser if they do that. And that's why they feel pressured to make more than their woman. That's why they do it, not necessarily because of some personal ego trip or attempt for control or whatever. They just don't want to be labeled a loser, basically. And that's the problem. We need to stop labeling people losers just because they make less than someone else. All right, 1 second. Technical difficulties.
No, I would
love that.
Are you serious? Clicking on the captions doesn't hit. Okay, I'll just move the mouse up here then.
That's
new.
That'd
be great.
I'm proposing ASAP.
As long as she's in the union.
Okay, so this is interesting, right? But then we ask this question: do you think that that the guy should pay on the first date?
Oh,
I'm gonna say my opinion before they say theirs. My opinion is that the date should be paid for whoever asks the other person out, but that leads into another issue, which is that women almost never approach men. And that's another thing in society that needs to change. Women need to start being the ones who go out and actually try to get men to go out on dates with them. Also, honestly, I might even say, I don't even think the first date should be on someone, the man or the woman. I think the first date should be a 50-50 split, because the whole point of a first date is to see if you like each other and to get to know each other better. And when it turns one person's expectation into like getting a free meal, essentially, someone is going to have in the back of their mind that they're just there for a free meal. Like, I've actually heard this very common from a lot of men I've talked to, that they've gone out with men and then, they are men that have gone out with women. And by the end of it, they get ghosted essentially. And they feel like the woman just used them for a free meal. And that's it. And so that's why I think the first date, even though I do still encourage women to start going out more and being the initiators of a first date, I don't think men should pay on the first date. I don't think the woman should either. I think it should be a 50-50 split. It's your first time meeting, your first like real date. You're trying to get to know each other. It also proves you're not there for a free meal. It also proves you're both equally invested. I feel like 50-50% on the first date should become the new norm. It's what people should expect.
Oh yeah, maybe the first.
On second dates, third dates, then it's up in the air. Maybe if the man wants to pay, if the woman wants to pay, maybe whoever makes more. I don't know. This is honestly something that you and whoever you're trying to look to make your partner should have a personal discussion with to find out what you want your pay dynamics to be. But the first date, the very first meeting, should always be 50-50 in my opinion.
On the first date.
Okay, all right, let's explore that. Let's explore. Right. So there's tension here. All of you said you would be quite happy being in a relationship with a woman that earns more than you. But all of you said that you should pay for the first date, and you said that's really interesting to me.
I think it's more of an acknowledgement, like, I've asked you out.
So see, I was right. That's why they were saying it. They're assuming that they're the ones who are asking the women out. Why is that the by default assumption that the men are going to ask the women out and not being asked out by a woman? And of course, that's a rhetorical question. I know why, and so do you as the viewer. You probably know why as well. The point is, that's the what I'm talking about. That's what needs to change. That needs to change. Women need to get used to asking out men more. If they're going to be the people earning more money now, especially, they need to be the ones going out and actually putting themselves out there.
So if she asked you out, it might be the other way around?
I mean, maybe, yeah, if she asked me out.
Okay, yeah, see, that's fair.
I don't think that's ever happened to me, but like, if a girl was like, for whatever reason, I really want you to go out.
It hasn't happened to any of us, by the way, so I don't know why we're all laughing.
Yeah, you're laughing because it's fucking true, and we all know it. We also know it's all fucked on a subconscious level, if nothing else. Like, yeah, women need to step up. All right, you wanted equality, you wanted equal rights that comes with equal responsibility, consequences, etc. And this includes in the dating market. You need to go out. If you have a man you like, if you've seen a man you like, ask him out. Go approach him. All right, we don't live in this society anymore where men are the fishers and just we get the girl and then we take care of them. That's not the thing. I mean, like fully financially, like they were talking about with their grandmother and grandfather. So that's not the case anymore. In the modern day, often, women make more than the men, and oftentimes both couples in a relationship are working just to make it through this economy. In that climate, women need to step up to the plate. Men don't need to step up. We're already on the plate. We're already running home runs around the whole damn park. Women, time to step up. If you're a woman watching this, you got a man you like, ask him out.
Men's issues with expectations can work the other way too. In a society following the old gender script, men are not only saddled with expectations, increasingly impossible to meet, but themselves are forced to expect less from certain institutions that are supposed to support everyone.
They're going to put you on the spot here a bit, Darren, because I know from some of the prep calls that you had some difficulties within a relationship. So we're here talking about dating, but let's talk about how relationships can end. I know you've had some personal experience with that, if you'd be willing to share.
It was an awful situation, honestly, because she actually ended up assaulting me.
Oh dear, I am so sorry to hear that.
So I have like a bite mark. I even recorded it because she had whipped me with like a hair.
Nice focus, camera guy. Real good work.
Hair blow dryer before, and I showed it to the judge to try to get a protective order, and he just laughed at the fact that I was taking back a hairdryer because obviously I don't have any hair. But as a judge, when I'm saying, hey, this person assaulted me, a domestic violence situation, for him to make that comment was really painful. And
yeah, it's really fucked, but it's true. This is another thing I've heard a lot of men talk about, is that they're not taken seriously in these cases because people often think the problem with a woman assaulting a man is whether or not they're a threat. I mean, obviously, if they have a gun or a knife, that's obvious they're a threat, first of all. But second of all, even if they're unarmed, them being a threat is not the point. The point is the intent to harm. The point is that they are typically as well emotionally abusive in these situations. I don't care whether or not you're a man made of stone. I don't care if you're literally the Thing out here, or wait, was it the Thing? I think it is, from the Fantastic Four, right? The guy made of stone, that guy. It doesn't even matter if you're that guy and I can take a sledgehammer to your back and you not even feel it. The fact I attempted it, the fact I would attempt it, that's what hurts the most. It really is. It's really what hurts the most in terms of your emotional state. And it's not okay that we keep giving women in the society a pass for assaulting men or doing whatever else simply because we view them as a lesser threat. That's just not okay. The reason I bring this up, by the way, is because just a few days ago on Twitter, I saw someone right hook a woman after she was beating the crap out of him. And then even the comment section was like, oh, he could have done XYZ, beat, bruh. No, welcome to equal rights. It comes with equal lefts. But no, all jokes aside, though, seriously, women need to take accountability for their actions, and men need to stop being held accountable for not being the most absolute perfect noble creature in high tense situations and whatnot, and being essentially punished despite being the victims in many of these cases just because they quote unquote weren't under threat. Because again, that's just not the point. The point is you laid hands, so it's fair game, and you should be charged as well with assault or whatever else. That's on you. Just because you're a woman, you shouldn't be receiving special treatment anymore. We don't live in that era anymore. Welcome to equality.
Ultimately, I got denied the protective order, and she was able to...
Of course he did. Mother. Of course he did.
Stay in the house and, you know, just continue being around me after assaulting me, after emotionally and mentally tormenting me this whole time.
It sounds like you feel...
This is so terrible. I have experiences similar to this myself on a personal level, and it is not good. It is not a good situation to be in, and it is not an easy situation to handle whatsoever.
I feel like the courts didn't treat you fairly.
Not at all. I had blood on my arm when I went into the to go get my protective order against her, and they said this is gonna last for a day. She, 2 days before she moved out, put a protective order on me saying that I was making Instagram posts about her. I was sleeping on the couch this whole time. She said I was busting in her door every day, verbally harassing her, and the judge took that and said, okay, great. Your protective order is granted for 7 days like that. And like I said, I walked in with blood on my arm and got one for 1 day.
Darren's story.
Yeah, it's fucked. The prejudice in our justice system against men needs to stop. All right, just because someone's a man, just because they're bigger and stronger than someone else, that shouldn't matter. In fact, people take the gender out of it. Let's say you're a giant, 280-pound guy, and you're the other person that's abusing you is another man who's like a 120-pound little twink or something like that. That should not matter. Whether it's a woman or a 120-pound twink, either way, the fact they tried to assault you should warrant you the same level of protection, especially under the law, as if it was someone with the same gender or someone even bigger than you. This is how it should be treated. Just because someone is cuter and smaller does not mean that they should not face the same consequences for their actions. And it's honestly one of the most disgusting, two-faced parts of our system that I'm aware of. It is absolutely disgusting to me.
Is emblematic, I think, of the problems on one side of the political stalemate over issues of sex and gender. Liberals refuse to accept that gender gaps can now run both ways, and they're...
True. That's what I talked about at the beginning of this video. They're terrible at marketing. A minority of them treat men horribly, and even the majority might not necessarily treat them horribly, but they invalidate their very real concerns. And if you side with them, you're just some misogynist, sexist, whatever else, something or other, because, I don't know, God forbid men struggle, I guess? Who knows?
They're too quick to label male problems as individual failings, symptoms of toxic masculinity.
Yes, this is a very toxic thing running through our society right now, where men are treated with societal failures and then blamed for these... they are blamed for societal failures, but it is attributed to personal failures. Because, again, people refuse to accept that men have it raw in society for some reason.
Conservatives, on the other hand, do appear to be more sensitive to the struggles of boys and men.
They pay lip service to it. Don't fall for it. They don't give a fuck about you. The second, look at the tax cuts they're doing, like that one other guy said. The second you are no longer useful or top of your game, the second you're disabled or needing Medicare or Medicaid or something like that, even if you're a veteran, get fucked. Instantly. Don't believe me. Look into their voting record. Speaks for itself.
Too often as a justification for turning back the clock and restoring traditional roles. So the left turns its back on boys and men, and
that's never happening, by the way. That's the hardest part to accept about all this. We're never turning the clock back. You can fight, kick, and scream against it all you want. For instance, like no-fault divorce, that is a genie we are never putting back in the bottle. It's never happening. Not in a democratic society, especially. That's just not how the linear time works. That's not how gaining rights work. Once a right is obtained, it is nearly impossible to ever retract it. You would need an absurd level of support from both sides. You would need an absurd level of evidence. It's just never happening, guys. I'm sorry, but that genie is never going back to the bottle of any kind. We just have to find a way to move forward, and unfortunately that means that a lot of this stuff is in women's courts. It's up to women to start reaching out more. It's up to women to start recognizing they're making more than men, and therefore they need to stop judging men for making less than they do. It's basically on society, and women especially right now, to start accepting that they have equal rights and equal responsibility, and men and women need to start being treated equally to match that. Because this idea of going back to the picket fence, stay-at-home housewife days is basically gone. A handful of people might still be able to achieve that dream, but it is not going to necessarily be the norm, especially not with legal ramifications included like it used to be. If anyone is living that way, it's 100% simply because they feel like it in the moment. Whereas back in the day, it was that way because they signed up for it and you couldn't just leave willy-nilly, which is the difference. But anyways, yeah, point is, we're equal now for better or worse, and everyone, men and women, to start accepting that and then working forward around it.
Right, turns back the clock on women and girls.
Never
As you can
happened.
imagine, these guys had a lot to say about both of these problems.
What I'll say about Democrats not only abandoning men, but I also think they kicked them into the curb and spit on them. You're telling men not to be men. You're telling men they can't watch football because it's sexist or UFC.
By the way, this is all part of what I said when I said they're bad at marketing. This is the kind of stuff I was talking about.
Because it's sexist. Yeah, men are into fighting. That's why Trump is there. You know, because Trump isn't abandoned us.
The Democratic Party.
He absolutely has. His big, beautiful bill is going to fuck your bank accounts. And a lot of the economy right now is crashing thanks to that stuff. Unfortunately, some people believe it, but it's not true. It's not true. Trump cares about one person and one person only. Even most other Republicans will recognize this. He only cares about Trump. That's it. It's all about his ego.
Party has abandoned men. I wholeheartedly agree with that. Does everyone else?
Yeah.
But I think what's worse is the Republican Party actively lying to men.
There it is.
They play the
Yes.
culture war. They don't want to talk about who could actually be exploiting them, like billionaires, corporations, like trans people are not hiking my credit card interest rates. They did not keep my wages stagnant.
Yep.
You're focusing on the wrong 1%.
You're right.
Yep, exactly. Yep, 100%. I fully agree with that, man. And again, don't get me wrong, I'm not like taking anything away from Democrats or whatever. Again, they are horrible at marketing. The way they are treating men and invalidating their concerns is also terrible. Neither side right now really cares about them. The Democrats at least care about you tangentially because you will see benefits from things like social programs. You will at least have people that care about you as a person, maybe not as a man, but as a person. Whereas where Republicans are just like, throw the baby out with the bathwater. Good luck. So that's why I'm ultimately a Democrat. But yeah, when it comes to the men issue, both sides have completely failed.
Wingman Joel, what do you think?
I was going to say...
Just threw you under the bus.
To your point,
effectively.
yeah.
I'm sorry.
I
had to get that out, man. I had to.
It's an open
Now we're
forum.
off.
It's an open forum.
Go on,
Yeah, I
go
might
on.
have to say a point against...
Speaking as a transphobe.
Speaking as a transgender myself. But, no.
Yeah, crazy.
No, the point you made earlier about how sort of the working class people on both sides, there really is no need to hate each other. I was thinking about that recently.
Also
The divide
true.
in America really should be class. You know, work versus, the elite. I can't see any conceivable way how in 2024 black people and white people can hate each other, or Mexicans or Latinos or whoever to hate each other. Really, we should be hating
They shouldn't.
the people making us hate each other. Now you can
Yes,
call it the
also true.
Illuminati or Hydra. I call them Democrats, but besides that, no, I'm kidding.
We're not cutting the corporate tax rate and giving them the ability to exploit their workers, but
But on the culture point, though, right? Wouldn't you say it does go both ways?
in
Yes.
which regard?
Don't you think on the left there could be a bit of a tendency to get women to blame men? It's
Yeah,
the patriarchy,
I
it's
can
toxic
see that.
masculinity.
I'm not disagreeing with that at all.
Isn't there an argument that it's actually equally true on the left?
I wouldn't say it's equal.
Especially on gender.
I would say the right absolutely plays more into the culture war
I'd agree with that
than
too. Yep.
the left does.
I would say the
Yep.
reason why we
The right does the right does the culture war, and the left fails the culture war. But the right fails the economics, and the left succeeds in the economics. Again, I don't care whether you like to hear it or not. It is a fact that if you compare Biden's America just a few months before he left office, when he was still in office, to the state of the economy today, it is an objective fact across the board that we were better off. The job numbers are better. The stock market was better. trade was better, relations with foreign, like a lot of stuff was better. This is just a fact. Even if you somehow still support Trump or the Republicans, it doesn't matter. These are objective facts of reality that you can Google. And so the Republicans fail men economically, and I'd argue to some degree spiritually as well, whereas the Democrats fail them in terms of culture. They fail them in terms of validation. They fail them in terms of purpose, in terms of pretty much all the stuff remotely around that. I'm trying to think. There was something else, but I'm forgetting the word. But yeah, so both sides in different ways completely are failing men right now, and I 100% agree with that.
We do that now is if you look at, I'd say, the 90s to the early 2000s, the right, the Republicans at least, weren't playing into the culture war thing. So we lost. We lost for a long time. And honestly, I think we still might. I think we did lose, and I think it's going to take a while for sort of Judeo-Christian morals to come back into the over 50%.
That's probably never happening again because Christianity, last I checked, is still on the decline. But I would argue Judeo-Christian morals are the reason why a lot of men are in pain right now. Where do you think a lot of these ideas came from that don't comport with an equal society now? Where do you think these provider expectations came from and whatnot? A lot of this came from Judeo-Christian morals and whatnot. And that's what we're having to now change. We're having to adapt to a new society, a new structure. And that's why those morals are getting outclassed, because a lot of those morals, now to be fair, there are some good. Everyone likes the golden rule. Treat others the way you want to be treated. That's a good one. There's a lot of good in the Bible. I'm not bashing it outright. There's a lot of good in it, but there's also a lot of bad and a lot of outdated stuff as well. And that's why it's probably never coming back, because we are getting to the point where we are moving past it. And personally, I think that's a good thing. I think that's growth. The same way, the great, whatever was before the Old Testament moved past what it was into the Old Testament. And then the same way the Old Testament moved on from what it was into the New Testament. We might not have a new prophet today or whatever, but to use like the Christian perspective or whatever, I think we're moving from the New Testament onto the New Testament or whatever. I think we're experiencing a new moral era of humanity, which I think is ultimately for the better. Yes, there's some clashing. Yes, there's some craziness, but I think ultimately, morally speaking, we are moving in a better direction, even if some of it is a little wild.
How would you know if they had come back?
I guess we're so open nowadays. Would kind of be a way to describe it. We aren't in ancient Judea 2,000 years ago, in a way, which I think is fine. I think it's the world we live in. I don't need women covering themselves.
Well, very few people would want to go back to.
No, I don't want to either. I like America.
Chris, let me ask you, whether you think the Democrats or the Republicans
America's
speak best
awesome,
to men right now.
I'd probably say the Republicans. I really can't answer it because I don't pay attention. None of them affect me. But I see more of the Republicans, whatever they talking about, because Trump and Vance and them, they just put themselves out there. They're more direct. You see Joe Biden is just some old guy. You can barely hear him. You know what I'm saying? You don't know what the hell he's talking about.
I mean, Trump is even older than Biden is. But yeah, I get what he's saying about the cadences. Also, he's like made some crazy rambling recently. He seems to have his own dimension now that we're stuck with for the next 3 years. But I do know what he's talking about. And he goes back to the culture war. It's why they won, because Biden was decrepit. He was ultimately able to run things, or his cabinet was, whoever you want to blame. But whereas Trump he did come off more punchy. He did come off more, I'm sorry, it's just a fact. Trump is funny. Like, he is. He's just, even if you hate him, which I do personally, I hate Trump, but he's hilarious. You can't deny that. So of course, people like this are going to think it's a really, really good thing. Because even by his own admission, he doesn't really care about politics. And if all you do is just look at the marketing, obviously, Republicans are going to win him over because, like I've said, Democrats suck ass at marketing. They're terrible at it.
Oh, and then you got Trump, who's going to come direct, more just to where I understand it.
I do agree that I feel like Republicans or conservatives have signaled to men, younger men, you have a place here. If you come with us, you'll have fun. You can be expressive. You can open yourself. You don't have to be polite. You don't have to pretend to be someone you're not. You don't have to be restricted.
Yep. This is something I've talked about before as well. Not necessarily on camera. This is something in my private life before I became a streamer or a YouTuber. But the other thing is what would you even call this? The pearl clutching, the wokeism, over moralization, the SJW shit, whatever you want to call it, this stuff needs to stop. All right? This needs to stop. Bring back the slurs. Bring back allowing people to act like people, even if it isn't the nicest people ever. Okay? Just let people say what they want and stop oppressing them for these reasons and treating them like they're the worst people on the planet. Not even necessarily for the beliefs they're espousing, but for specifically the words they're using. And yeah, the pearl clutching just needs to stop, guys. It needs to absolutely stop. Even other liberals are getting sick and tired of it. The leftists are a cancer. They are a cancer.
Drained. I don't believe it's the way that they funnel men into this corner is the best. I mean, you'll watch a video on YouTube about working out, and then Andrew Tate will pop up eventually, and then you know, some more right-wing comedian will pop up, and then you'll have, you know, Joe Rogan, and then you'll have Ben Shapiro, and then you'll just be exposed to this whole manosphere.
I hate this term, the Joe Rogan of the left, that they need one. Joe Rogan is sort of left. He endorsed Bernie Sanders in 2016 and 2020.
All I've seen in my lifetime is Democrats conceding more and more and more and more.
That is kind of true, but he was left, but then some parts of COVID broke his brain, and then he started going very right with a lot of stuff. Recently, though, I think Trump has been so insane, specifically with immigration, at least from a few clips of him I've seen, that he seems to finally be going back left a little bit more. But yeah, Joe Rogan isn't really left. He's centrist, I would say. He's pretty solidly centrist. Yeah, he would support Bernie, but that's because Bernie was a populist. He didn't support Bernie because he was a liberal or on the left, like the way he would say a proper Democrat like Kamala Harris or Joe Biden or, you know, Gavin Newsom or whoever else. He supported Bernie because he's a populist ultimately, and his populism, I think, supersedes his left and right moral framework or political spectrum. So that's really what it comes down to. Trump was a populist, so he likes Trump. Bernie was a populist, so he likes Bernie. That's really all it comes down to.
Especially on men's issues,
Especially on men's issues. And they're just like, you know, slowly like shrinking the circle of issues that they actually care about to align with things that aren't going to get their donors pissed off at them, you know? I love the point, though, about Joe Rogan endorsing Bernie Sanders twice, because anytime somebody who appeals to young men across the board rises to a level where they might actually reach any sort of real power, Democrats just kneecap them.
The Democrats.
Yep, 100%. Bernie Sanders got kicked in the nards by the DNC, and it was disgusting. I still remember the night when it happened, too. I still remember it. He was on track to become probably the nominee of the Democratic Party, and then to make sure there was no competition and that everyone could rally around a single candidate, every single person except Joe Biden dropped out simultaneously. So it became Joe Biden versus only Bernie, and then he got slaughtered. But to be fair, there is also something to say that a lot of people, just for whatever reason, as hard as it is to believe, don't like Bernie Sanders. They just don't. Even on the left, they just don't. That's why ultimately Biden won. That's ultimately why Biden had a larger part of the vote on the primary than Bernie Sanders did. Did he get screwed? Did they rally behind Biden to screw Bernie? Yes. But even if they hadn't done that, it's possible he still would have lost, because it's a hard pill to swallow, because I know how it's hard to like imagine for some people. What? He wants people to have better healthcare. He wants to get rid of the insurance companies that have like been killing people for years, and he wants to focus more on America and bring us out of foreign wars. How could anyone disagree with this stuff? I don't know how. I don't know how, but somehow they do. They do, and then they hate him, and then he doesn't get elected. That's just how it is. It sucks, but it's how it is.
Democrats don't have a narrative when the Republicans do. The Republicans are
that's the marketing I was talking about.
People, a bunch of minority communities. They're the reason why your life is bad. The Democrats don't have that. They have, we're going to tinker around the edges of the status quo.
Well, wouldn't they say that it's the billionaires, it's the
I don't think the corporate wing of the party would.
They're sitting in the room.
Yeah, they're sitting in the room. The Democrats have as much corporate money as the Republican Party does.
Do you think that the Democrats have become too much the women's party?
I don't even think you can really say that. Like, I think there are probably more women that vote Democrat than men.
That's true. They are absolutely true.
But I think Democrats are just completely empty and lack any real spine when it comes to any issues whatsoever.
Yes, it's disgusting, but it's true. It is. Look at what happened with Chuck Schumer recently. They had a chance to finally block one of Trump's bills. They had a chance to do it. And what happened? Chuck Schumer crossed the line. The leader of the freaking party crossed the line with 4 other Democrats and made sure the bill passed. Absolutely disgusting. I don't even want to hear that, oh, it was a greater strategy, or, oh, he did it for XYZ reason. It doesn't matter. Again, this comes back to the marketing and why Democrats suck at it. It doesn't matter. He should have held his ground. Consequences be damned. People wanted to see a moment of resistance, and he folded like a lawn chair. A lawn chair takes longer to fold than Chuck Schumer's spine. Disgusting.
Republicans, they do the things they campaigned on. For better or worse, I think most of the policies they implement are just objectively evil and create more human suffering than, we already have. But they actually do them. And it speaks...
Yeah, that's fair. That's true. That's true. I mean, by the way, that's why it shocked me. Joe Rogan had a thing when he was talking about, oh, well, Trump was saying he was just going to get rid of the criminals. No, he's not. Oh, I mean, yeah, he was. But what they're failing to account for is that every illegal is by definition a criminal by default. That's what Trump meant when he said that. So now that ICE is going around rounding up every random person from Home Depot, suddenly they're surprised? Bro, you voted for it. It's just, I'll give him that. He at least tries. He does try to follow through his campaign promises, no matter how bad they are. And they'll use any underhanded tactic they can. They'll even violate the Constitution if they can, which Trump has already done multiple times in multiple different ways to try and get what he wants. Meanwhile, Democrats are completely cucked.
To voters, if you're the kind of person that thinks illegal immigrants are causing all the problems in this country, then you like what's going on right now. You like that people are being randomly kidnapped off the street.
There's an authenticity to
it. They're not telling you one thing and doing another. Democrats, on the other hand, they tell you that they want to do all these progressive things. They tell you they support, lowering the cost of healthcare and education. They tell you they support, raising the minimum wage. And then what happens when they get in office?
Fucking nothing. Exactly. They're spineless. They're fucking spineless.
Biden can't even get his own senators to approve raising the minimum wage from $7.25 an hour. Like, the fact that that's still the federal minimum wage in this year, 2025, is a joke.
What they were talking about really was a sense of authenticity. There's a high degree of respect among men, I think especially for young men, for men who say what they think and stand by it.
Yep, stand by it.
He's been insanely consistent his entire life. He's basically been saying the same thing, been for the same thing his whole life.
That kind of codes as a kind of masculine virtue.
The Republicans, they have co-opted masculinity and they've politicized it. You see it in UFC. I'm on the left. I like watching UFC. I think it's very entertaining. I think it's a very skill-filled sport, but I don't want to...
Who doesn't like to see hot, sweaty men with rippling muscles grabbing and rubbing all over each other? Am I right, boys?
See Trump and RFK Jr. and nerdy Mike Johnson walking to the octagon. People...
You kind of do want to see Mike Johnson do that.
I don't want to see him anywhere.
Nowhere has all of this mess played out more than in one specific phrase.
What do you think of the term toxic masculinity? Good and useful term, or a bad and unhelpful term?
I'll give my 2 cents first again. I think ultimately it served its purpose at one point, but I think now it's bad because what people consider toxic masculinity today, at least especially online, isn't toxic masculinity. It's just masculinity. It's the way you'll see women take men's natural dominance, for instance. Most men are generally dominant, and then they'll try and twist it into just being about control rather than about being responsible or nurturing or whatever else. And so they'll call that toxic instead of just masculine. And an example, by the way, of good masculinity, if you want a fictional example, Uncle Iroh is a peak example of masculinity in fiction. And if you want to talk about a real man, I would say Arnold Schwarzenegger. And now we don't agree on politics on everything. Obviously he's a Republican, so I'm going to disagree with him on some stuff. But he is one man I will say has principles. I've seen him stand on principle, even against MAGA, even against some of the modern day Republican policies, while still standing against the Democrats as well. And he has used his strength and his wealth to inspire thousands, if not millions of people and he has actively used his wealth to help others around him, such as veterans and Marines. He stands on principles. He means what he says, and he has strength, but also compassion. He understands, like go watch his speech, for instance, about being a self-made man, or rather not being a self-made man, and what his thoughts about that notion even are. He is a very strong candidate for what the right, or even just men in general, should be looking towards in terms of a role model. Maybe not necessarily for their politics, but for their strength of character and for how well they take care of themselves and those around them. Arnold Schwarzenegger is an excellent man. He has his flaws. He's not perfect. He's done some stuff. He has. But I would take him 1 trillion times over anyone even remotely close to as disgusting as Andrew Tate or most of the Red Pill podcast people. Absolutely. By the way, I'm not being paid to say this. Shout out to him. 7 ways to be, Be Useful, 7 Tips for Life. That's the name of the book. Be Useful, 7 Tips for Life or whatever. Look that up. That's Arnold Schwarzenegger's one of his latest books. He narrates himself. If you want an audio form, go look it up. Amazing book. A lot of inspirational stuff if you need it. I can't recommend it enough. Again, not being paid to say this.
Who's answering that?
I'm just going to see who wants to take toxic
Well, I'll
masculinity.
go first.
This is how we find out who's the most toxic.
Well, I hope I ain't too toxic, but for me, I don't even believe in nothing like that. I believe a man is supposed to be a man. You know what I'm saying? You're supposed to be masculine. No matter if another man feels offended by it, you know, everybody ain't gonna respect you. Everybody ain't gonna like you. If a
Also
woman's
true.
saying that a man's doing too much or something, he's just trying to be a man, you know?
Or he might be being a jerk or a predator or whatever. right?
So what do they mean by toxic
Right,
masculinity?
well, that's the question.
Okay,
that's the point.
I never understood it.
At one point, this term toxic masculinity had a very narrow and concrete, quite academic definition. And it wasn't actually created by kind of liberal academic elites. It came from a group of men, specifically men driven by a kind of spiritual movement in the 80s and 90s that was a response to feminism in many ways. Until around 2015, the phrase warranted just a few footnotes, really, in academic journals. But with the rise of Donald Trump and the Me Too movement, progressives brought this term toxic masculinity into everyday use. Suddenly it was everywhere, thousands of mentions, impossible to ignore. But the term's very rarely defined, and it now seems to refer to any male behavior that the user of the term disapproves of.
Yep.
From the tragic.
Just
to the
like I was
trivial.
talking about.
Toxic masculinity has been blamed, among other things, for mass shootings, gang violence, rape, online trolling, climate change, the financial crisis, Brexit, the election of Donald Trump, even an unwillingness to wear a mask during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Vaguely.
Bruh, there were tons of women I saw. Tons of women who refused to wear a mask. This is actually kind of a perfect little microcosm of what I was talking about in terms of like how men are ultimately just blamed for everything. Oh, a woman isn't wearing a mask? Oh, that's because toxic masculinity. But she's a woman. Oh, internalized masculinity or whatever. I don't know. They'd have some bullshit they'd make up. And that's my point, is that they'll make up anything to where it's always somehow men's fault. And then what I am fascinated by, what I would love to see, just as a case study, is what if a matriarchal society actually arose and then had all these same problems? What would they say then? I bet you their heads would explode, because then it would force them to accept the fact that it's accountability. It would force them to accept that the person in the mirror is actually the problem. But they can't do that.
Speaking, it's overused. I mean, they said the term boys will be boys is offensive now in the same sort of way. And it's like, you know.
It kind of is, to be fair. To be fair, I've heard a lot of women. Also, by the way, fun fact, I actually have never heard that phrase used by a man, ever. I've only ever heard women use that phrase to defend their sons when they're acting up. Just quick small fun fact on that. But for what it is, the boys will be boys saying was usually used and is used very commonly to excuse, quite frankly, behavior that a man or a husband or a father needs to crack down on. Boys will not be boys. Boys will be people. Women will be people. Both are people, and both are expected and should be expected now to act the same way. All right. Again, screw this double 2-tier justice system bullcrap. All right. If your boy acts up, he should get consequences. If your girl acts up, she should also get consequences. Same way, both genders.
I just want to drink and punch each other. I don't get how that's toxic. I mean, I can sort of get the idea of, you know, when Prohibition was coming to America, the idea is that the man makes the money, And instead of spending on his family, he spends it on whiskey. You're like, oh, and then he beats his wife. Like, yeah, I guess that's being toxically masculine, but I don't think that a wholesale exists anymore. I just think it's a term, to put down men who want to be men. I'm not into makeup. That might be shocking.
That's just toxic.
That's just toxic. That's just regular.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I didn't want to interrupt them again, but yeah, that was what I was going to say. That's not even toxically masculine. That's just being an asshole. That's just being toxic. That's just being an abuser.
They're toxic.
Before 2016, before this dressed up word, you'd have this guy's an asshole. He's overly aggressive. He's just, way too forward, or he's creepy, or whatever it might be. So you call him an asshole, you call him weird, whatever. But now it's toxic masculinity, and then there's like a whole bunch of other opinions that people can just lump into toxic masculinity. But when you call someone an asshole, you kind of just know what they're talking about.
They
Yeah.
need to go back to just
good.
saying
All right.
that. That's a lot easier.
Say that again.
They should just go back to just calling guys a-holes. Like,
I'd like to be called. So, conclusion of this debate: everyone's an asshole.
We should just
No one's toxic.
Mission accomplished.
I don't find this response from the guys here surprising at all. Very few men or boys are going to react well to the idea that there's something toxic inside of them that needs to be exorcised. I didn't try to raise my sons to be not toxic. That's not a very empowering message. I think, if anything, it's the opposite, that the term toxic masculinity will sort of drive more boys and men away to the online manosphere, where they'll be reassured at least that there's nothing wrong with them, and it's actually the liberals who are out to get them. But also, at a deeper level,
That's what I was saying about the scam. Like, that's what I'm saying. The left ends up trying to make it bad to be a man and tries to demonize some of the core aspects of being a man in multiple different ways. And they run to the right, and the other side is like, hey, you will be fine. You will be happy. You will have a family. There's nothing wrong with any of this at all. And then, that's... Are you surprised that they end up turning right after that? I mean, the left just needs to really work on stop hyper moralizing everything and just let people be people, man.
what this means is that we miss the opportunity to address the real structural problems facing many boys and men, when instead we focus on the toxic flaws in those individual men. So if they're depressed, we say it's because they don't express their feelings. If men get sick, it's because they won't go to the doctor. If they fail at school, it's because they don't try hard enough. And that's a very far cry from how the term was originally meant to be used.
I think the term itself comes from a good intention, which is like, how can we create a healthier society for everyone involved? I think most of us would agree that there's a severe mental health problem in this country, and a lot of the time it manifests itself in men.
80% of suicide,
right, the suicide rate,
most
rates of addiction, rates
much
of,
higher among men.
Much higher.
I'd like to dig in a bit more on just how the mental health issues are kind of playing out differently for men and women. I mean, I shared some stats earlier around the much higher suicide.
You know what? I just thought of something, and I'm going to say it. I think I know what toxic masculinity is, what I would call toxic masculinity anyways. I don't know, obviously what the original saying was or whatever. This is just me based on the words toxic and masculinity together. What I would consider toxically masculine is how in society it's the overwhelming pressures that still exist from the past to things like be a provider, and if you're not, you're an immediate loser. Even if your woman's the provider and you're like the house husband or whatever. Again, the inability for men to step into feminine roles. I would say that this is probably toxic masculinity, at least when it comes from men, although you could argue as well that some of it is partially attributed to being toxically feminine, if that's even a word, toxically feminine, which is like, I mean, actually, never mind. I think that might be something else. Anyways, you get what I'm saying. The point is that there are toxic expectations on men in society today that, quite frankly, need to be done away with, and that both men and women need to move past and adapt with. And I would consider some of those things toxically masculine, and those are the things that are leading to the 80% suicide rate. Like, if you're to the point where you're like so hard up to be a provider, for instance, that you won't date a woman who makes more than you, even if she's willing to accept that you make less than her and doesn't think less of you for it, that is an example of toxically masculine. You're letting your ego get in the way of a potentially healthy, happy relationship just to stroke your own ego. That's, I would say, toxically masculine. Something like that. That's what I would call toxic masculinity.
Suicide rates among men actually has gone up most among young men. It's really men under 30 where we've seen the rise. The rise in drug poisoning deaths has been mostly men. Substance abuse is mostly men. And so it's not to say there aren't issues that go the other way, but I just like any more reflections that you've got on how you think the mental health stuff is playing out. We talked a bit about the lack of male psychologists and your counselor. So maybe we should start with you, Ed, and talk a bit about your own experience.
Yeah, so I'm in recovery. I'm sober. I've been sober from primarily alcohol for 2.5 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And it's a little tough being a 24-year-old in recovery, having the weird eyes and the weird questions.
Well, I haven't had a drink for 5 years. It's not much easier in your 50s.
Oh, congrats. Nice.
Thank you.
But no, it was just, I'd gone through personally a whole, string of personal losses, and unfortunately I turned to alcohol to cope with my issues mentally, emotionally, and physically. And I needed all the help I could get.
I think that the whole area of mental health gets, if we're not careful, it gets coded as a bit female.
Yeah.
It's what women do. The websites look quite female.
Boys don't cry.
Yeah.
All that stuff, puff out your chest kind of shit. I don't know. Boys can't go to therapy. I think everybody in their life should go to therapy. They should try it once.
Like Darren said, most of the medical field is all women.
Well, it's certainly shifting that way. And like psychology, therapy, social work, they're just becoming massively more female.
Yep.
Jobs like these, increasingly dominated by women, fall into the industries that I call HEAL: health, education, administration, and literacy. If we're going to do right by the men in our society, we need to both protect workers in traditionally male industries and help men adapt to current economic realities by encouraging them to transition into these HEAL jobs. We know a lot about STEM initiatives for women, and they've helped massively. We've tripled the share of STEM workers who are women. But we now need the same type of mass effort for young men to encourage them into education and health. I'm very proud.
There is another part of this, by the way, as well, I need to touch on, which is that you will see this actually from people like Asmongold, who again, I mostly like. We have some disagreements here and there, but I mostly like him. But if you watch his content, a lot of his stuff, in fact, he's even admitted himself, actually, I don't need to tiptoe around this. He's admitted it. The dude has like no empathy. He has very, very, very little empathy, if any at all. And he will emphasize how a lot of people just quite frankly don't care. They don't care, like one way or the other. And the fact is that a lot of this isn't going to change until men start caring about other men, which, to be fair, I think has started growing recently, but it's not as common as it should be. And that's a part that men still need to work on. Men need to work on actually giving a shit about each other a bit more than they used to. This, like, I don't care about you in any way, shape, or form, just get the thing done kind of mentality needs to die in order for probably a lot more growth on the man's side to actually start happening. That's what I think anyways.
The fact that my son is a 5th grade teacher. And gender gaps can't be addressed without also addressing class gaps. While the gender pay gap has narrowed by 19 percentage points in the last 40 years, the class pay gap between the top and the middle has widened by 12 percentage points.
Yep.
There's a moment really I want to leave you with, stuck with me and I found inspiring. After we'd wrapped up, the 5 young men who disagreed with each other pretty strongly, they sat and shared a bite to eat, exchanged numbers, and they just hung out with each other, not as representatives of different political ideologies or as enemies, but as fellow young men trying to figure things out.
Yeah, this is something else that I think really needs to get worked on, is that the political divide in America is getting uncomfortable when it should be something more like this. It shouldn't necessarily be that everyone you disagree with is someone you can't even interact with to any degree, but this gets complicated because, to use disability as an example, let's say you're someone who's disabled and then someone comes along and says, oh, I don't think disability should be a thing. You are effectively telling that person, whether you realize it or not, whether you mean it or not, you are telling that person to their face that you hope they die. Because if they can't take care of themselves because they're disabled or whatever, then, I mean, without that system, they die. Like, that's how that works. So I hate this mentality that, like, politics are just politics and why can't we just get along despite disagreeing? Well, the reason is because when we disagree, it's usually on stuff that is like non-negotiable. Now, most of it is negotiable, and that's where I'm saying that, like, most people get it wrong. Most is negotiable, most is acceptable. But there are certain red lines for people, especially like where you're essentially saying, I hope you die or whatever, or I'm okay if you do die. That is where you can obviously draw the line and where I think people should start breaking off certain relationships because that's just toxic. to keep in your life if someone cares about you that little. But with that being said, outside of those hyper specific things, which by the way, to be fair, most people don't disagree on, these are some of the most popular programs in America for a reason, like Social Security, disability, other stuff like that. But when it comes to non-lethal stuff, like whether or not what a certain tax rate is, or what certain cultural differences are, these things should not necessarily lead to people being enemies, or being necessarily seen as evil. And by the way, yes, I do realize I said that Republicans were evil in the prior video, but just to clarify, when I said that, I meant the elected Republicans, although to some degree, some of the Republican base is pretty wild as well. After all, they are the ones who elected them. But I find they're usually men like this. They're usually people who are just either uninformed or don't really care, or just kind of, they check with the vibe, or again, they've been driven there by the Democrats' failure to appeal to them or even fucking consider them for anything. And that's why they end up there. So just because someone votes Republican doesn't mean that they're evil necessarily. The elected Republicans, I mean, I'm sorry, they just tried to strip $1 billion away from Medicare and Medicaid or whatever, and then they also are trying to find ways to cut SNAP. I think Alabama it was, or some shit, just or maybe it was Arkansas. One of the two just passed a law, or is trying to pass a law to make it a work requirement to receive basic Medicaid or whatever. Or I think it was Florida or something. I don't know. Another Republican state is trying to pass a law to make child labor legal again. Get them kids back in the mines. I mean, it's like, these are, like, I'm sorry. In my opinion, these are just objectively evil things. They are. You're leaving poor people and sick people to die on the streets when they don't need to be. And you're trying to bring kids back into the workforce when, again, they don't need to be. They should be focusing on studying and whatnot. While also simultaneously disassembling the education of health. I mean, the health education ministry or whatever it's called. Department of Education or whatever it's called. You get what I'm saying. Point is, a lot of this stuff is absolutely wild. And I know a lot of Republicans that, despite voting for these people, don't necessarily agree with these policies and wanted reform. They wanted fixes. They didn't trust the Democrats to do it, but they trusted the Republicans to do it. But then they turned around and they just completely disassembled these systems instead, and without a proper backup. And now they're just standing there with their arms in the air like, guys, what the fuck? So, but yeah, this is what I hope people can be like again, just being able to shoot the shit over differences. It's part of why I made my channel and why I try to interact with viewers on stream. By the way, a link in the description down below, Twitch and Kick, follow, turn on the notification bell. Even I don't necessarily know what I'm streaming right now. Things are kind of chaotic, but you can hit that to follow me. And I talk all the time in chat. I'm willing to talk about just about anything. I usually try to come at it from a very empathetic perspective, a very understanding perspective. But if you are being wild, I will call it as I see it. So anyways, that's my opinion. I just wanted to add that on here, that I do miss when people of different opinions could also get along, because there was like some core foundational principle that was still uniting them. And that's what I'm really worried about in this nation, is that from what I've been seeing, I feel like especially the Republicans, especially the elected Republicans, are kind of losing what it means to be American. When you have the president just like bucking the Supreme Court without a care, when you have the president trying to violate due process, whether you think it's for right reasons or not, when you have him trying to keep TikTok open even after the expiration date, even though both Congress and the Supreme Court have signed off on it being shut down. Again, you can disagree with it. You can think that ultimately that's wrong or maybe unconstitutional of itself. Doesn't matter. The point is the system that has ruled that is... Oh, sorry if you're hearing that. I'm adjusting my chair. The system has decided that TikTok should be shut down, but he is unilaterally, as the president, keeping it operational by simply refusing to enforce the law. Like, this is just not okay. This is not a president of law and order. You're not following the law. You're not maintaining proper order. You're just trying to grab and seize power wherever you see it. And this is just un-American. Like, even if you're a Republican, you should see this for what it is, which is un-American. This is not what we're supposed to stand for, even if we disagree on other minor political issues. At the end of the day, we have these systems, we have these processes, we have the Constitution, and they should be respected. And by the way, don't try and catch me in any double stuff like, oh, well, what if What like when Biden pardoned his son, or what if he violated the Constitution in this part here? I disagree with that too. I don't care. I'm not a political hack. I side with the Democrats because of several reasons, but not because I'm some fucking cultist who's just going to side with them on every single issue, as I've demonstrated in this video. I disagree heavily with how they've treated men. I disagree heavily with their marketing. I disagree heavily with them having no fucking spine. But anyways, yeah, back to the video. That's my 2 cents on that. How much I miss
Discussed. A lot
this.
of young men don't have a script anymore for how they should be in the world. Quite
Also
often they
true.
know what they shouldn't do, but they don't know what they should do. And so what we need now are some new economic and social scripts which allow for a positive vision of masculinity that is also compatible with gender equality. If we're going to write a new script for men that matches modern society, it's not going to come out finding the perfect influencer. It's going to come out of messy conversations like this one. So thank you for watching, and hopefully, no matter what side of the political spectrum you land on, you got something out of this conversation. I know I did. More Perfect Union wants to have more conversations like this, not just about and with young men, but on all sorts of themes. Send them a line at stories@perfectunion.us. And don't forget to like and subscribe to their channel.
Link in the description down below to the original video. All right, I'm gonna let the credits play. Oh, that was it. Okay. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. I said everything I really had to say there at the end. There's just a lot of toxicity in society, especially online nowadays. A lot of it stemming from people who are just, quite frankly, way too invested in their political sides, even when it makes no sense. Like, again, just imagine if Obama did even a quarter of the things Trump has done. It would be considered beyond the pale, and everyone, left and right, would be calling for impeachment. But instead, with Trump, the right just doesn't care. And that's why I'm saying I'm worried about the soul of our country right now. I'm worried that a good chunk of it is losing what it means to be American and replacing it with the thought that just anything that they think or anything that they like is necessarily what's best, or what the nation stands for, when it's not, and it shouldn't be. So anyways, with that being said, I don't really think I have much else to add. I pretty much emptied everything during the video. Yeah, that's pretty much it. All right, well, thank you for sticking around. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you around, either in the comments or in stream. I'd love to have discussions about this stuff more often with more people. And roll the outro. Have a lovely day. And go to therapy.